It is as though every single person who has ever looked at a nutritional label once in their entire life feels obligated to save us from this imminent doom that is about to occur because we decide to eat a graham cracker or we decide to eat a small cookie that has a carb count on it. Welcome to the Your Diabetes Insider podcast, where we take all of the mysteries of blood sugar control, focusing on nutrition, exercise, and any of the other 40 plus factors that may impact your blood sugar. If you don't know me, my name is Ben Zeal. I'm a registered dietitian, certified diabetes educator, strength and conditioning coach, and I've lived myself with type 1 diabetes for over 20 years. And I am here to share everything that I have learned in both my personal and professional experience so you can live that incredible diabetes life. So get ready and let's dive right into today's episode. All right, what's going on? Welcome to this episode of the Your Diabetes Insider podcast. I'm Ben, your host. Your local neighborhood dietitian, diabetes educator, strength coach, and T1D vet of almost 24 years, which is kind of hard to believe, but here we are. Fun times, right? So thinking about this today, I was really just deep in my thoughts, deep in my own head. And I constantly, you can't avoid it on social media or really anywhere, where you've got people arguing on, can you eat this? Can you eat that? You should not have this food. And I get told this so often. If I had $1 for every time that I was told that I could not or should not eat a particular food, man, I could probably buy you a car at this point. And my favorite too, and I'll get into the real meat of it in a second, but my favorite too is, especially as a dietitian, I'll go post on a platform, and the most common one to get these hilarious comments from are TikTok. And if you're watching from TikTok, I appreciate you, but also recognize I am reading these comments. And I'll post, for example, hey, here's some snack ideas for great blood sugars, or here's some snack ideas that I like as a diabetes dietitian. And people's commentary, you shouldn't have this. There are these chemicals. There's this. This is too high in carb. This is too low in carb. This is... Just stop trying to tell the dietitian how to eat. That's first and foremost, please, for the love of God. Don't tell me how to eat. I'm not telling you how to eat. I'm just giving you some suggestions of things you might want to incorporate into your life. But I digress on the rant. The big thing here, the big thing I want to talk about today is this concept of what you can and cannot eat living with diabetes. And of course, you might think, oh, well, you can have anything you want, just dose for it, which is absolutely accurate to a degree if you plan to live a life of blood sugar roller coasters where you're not sure where the ride's going, but that you're on the ride and you hope that at some point you'll be allowed off of it. But the lever to start the ride is broken and you could be on it for the next 3 days continuously and no one else will get to ride it with you. And it sounds rather sad and depressing if you ask me. So I also just really don't like roller coasters. So that's probably part of the reason it sounds depressing, but I don't think anyone wants to be on a roller coaster forever and ever, especially when it comes to the blood sugars. And a really good way to illustrate what you can and can't have. I've got a bunch from when I was a kid, because I'm sure you can just start to imagine, especially early on in diagnosis, oh, here's the cupcake, you can't have it, yada, yada, yada. And I can share that story a different day. There were some really egregious instances, but there's one in particular from not all that long ago. This is probably 4 years ago, about maybe something like that. It was within the past 4 to 5 years. It was right before COVID. And what ended up happening was I went to a restaurant with a couple of my friends and their parents were there. And the parents, they were a little bit older. They were really sweet, really nice. And they just had this old school mentality when it came to blood sugars and diabetes. And so I just remember it was an Asian restaurant. It might've been pho. There was a lot of carbs in whatever I was eating. There was a giant bowl, maybe it was ramen. It was one of the two. There's giant bowl, tons of noodles, probably 100 plus carbs in this bowl. And I'm eating it. I'm having a great time with my friends. We're talking to their fam. And the parents just kept looking at me and wondering what was going on. And they had heard I had diabetes. And one of them asked me, the mom, she was like, why are you eating that? Like, you can't have that because of your diabetes. And I said, well, actually, I can as long as I fit it into my nutrition plan. And I also decide to take the right insulin for it. And she said, but no, there's too many carbs. You're not able to have carbs because of your diabetes. That will be very bad for you. And I'm sitting here trying to keep it together because they're someone's parents, right? I'm doing my best to be respectful. But there's also this part of me that's just driving myself nuts because I want to just sound off and be like, lady, I'm a registered dietitian and I do this for a living for other people with diabetes, and I help them so they can enjoy food and they don't have to feel limited in what they're allowed and not allowed to have. And you're over here telling me what to eat. Where is your nutritional training? Where is your diabetes training? But I didn't say any of this. That was the internal monologue in my head. And then the father says to me, this is where it gets real fun. To get rid of your diabetes, all you got to do is just drink a little bit of okra water. And I'm like, well, where do I get okra water? Because at this point, I was just intrigued. I'd like to buy some and just try it just to show it doesn't work. Derp. But he didn't know where to buy it. He just said, yeah, you have to get the water from okra and then some cinnamon too. And at this point, I just knew that it wasn't going to matter what I said. There was going to be no way that this was going to end well. So I just smiled and nodded and said, yeah, thank you so much. And I went on with my life. But the unsolicited advice that's given to us as people with diabetes is just monumental. It is insane. It is as though every single person who has ever looked at a nutritional label once in their entire life feels obligated to save us from this imminent doom that is about to occur because we decide to eat a graham cracker, or we decide to eat a small cookie that has a carb count on it, or God forbid, we decide to order dessert at a restaurant, or eat a bowl of ramen, or whatever the hell it was, the food that I had in that story. That is the thing. And what I want to really emphasize here is kind of what that internal monologue said in my head. You can have the foods you want as long as you are smart about it. I am not of the mentality of, well, you can dose for it, you'll be fine. Because that is the first class one-way ticket to gaining a ton of weight, which will negatively impact your blood sugar. And on top of that, lead you to that roller coaster that I mentioned before, that very lonely ride where you don't know how long you're going to be on the ride, but you're going to be on it for quite some time. And the insulin is not the reason I mentioned the weight gain. The weight gain is because you're on the roller coaster. So now your number is going to go super high. You're probably going to overcorrect. You're going to crash. When you crash, you have to eat. You then probably overeat. Your blood sugar goes high again. You go down again. And the cycle just continues really, 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 really for a long time. And even just over time, living in that cycle does not usually end well. So here's my thing for you. Squash the thoughts that there's a food you cannot eat. I will go out of my way at this point, and whether this is just to spite people from the decades of being told what I can and can't have, or maybe this is simply just because I've adapted, I've transformed, whatever verb you would like to use, but I've become someone who really appreciates food and flavor and good tasting food. And periodically, Amelia and I, my fiance, once a week, will go out to a restaurant and we want to enjoy it. And we want to enjoy what we're having and maybe try some different flavors from the stuff that we're having at home. And there's probably a dessert that we want to try. But if you see me post a crazy picture of some crazy food, or not so long ago, I broke down a half-pound cookie that was covered in chocolate chips, it doesn't mean that I am going to sit there and I'm going to consume 3 of them at one time. It means I broke this food down to show you that it can be done, and then I go ahead and I eat it as part of my goals. The part you don't see when I post some of these crazy foods is the part where I still hit my daily nutritional targets that I have for myself. And I'm not just talking about, is it a certain amount of carbs or protein? I'm talking the calorie intake, the fiber intake, the micronutrient intake. So your vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D, all of that. You're not seeing that part where we'll go out to dinner and it might look like I have this exorbitant amount of food, but I'm still able to reach the other targets that I have set for the day for myself, which is also how I'm able to maintain my blood sugars, because my body is accustomed to a certain amount of food. And if I don't provide that level of food, it's going to respond differently. Separate topic for a separate day. But if you want to hear more about that, for sure, let me know, because that's a big one. So the biggest thing here is then you're probably thinking, okay, Ben, well, you eat these things, and how do you break them down? How do you assess them? How do you determine what you need to do to dose for them to fit them into your life? And that, my friend, is an art and a science in and of itself. And it's probably If it's not number one, it is number two of the most common thing that we go over with patients in our practice, because it's a topic that gets glossed over by 97% of providers because they either don't have the time to go into it, they don't have the bandwidth, or they simply just don't know the answer. And that's why so many of these providers will go into the whole rant of, well, you need 30 to 60 grams of carbs per meal and 20 or 15 to 30 at a snack and keep it you don't need to do that. This isn't 1987. This is 1999 for that matter, when I was diagnosed. But the important thing here is, how do you assess those carbs? And it really depends on the food. It really truly depends on the food. But the biggest thing I can suggest for you, and the first thing I would want you to try out of the gate, and I want you to do this, I want you to report back, I want you to tag me on social media. If you're on Instagram or TikTok, at Man of Zeal, MANOFTZEEL, and tell me how this goes. But I want you to break it down piece by piece. And I've got tons of videos of different types of meals. Some are on good old YouTube. I do little snippets on Instagram as well. But I want you to break it down piece by piece in this particular fashion. I want you to first go through it and figure out, okay, where are the carb sources in here? Now, if you're not sure, if you're just thinking straight up, I have no idea what has carbs in it, I have no idea what doesn't have carbs in it, that is a different situation, and we need to make sure that you can identify the different types of carbs first. But let's just say, hypothetically, what sounds good right now? Chicken carbonara pasta. That sounds great. Could it be? Yeah, we could do that. So there's chicken, there's the sauce, which is like a creamy based sauce. There's sometimes some peas. There might be a few other veggies in there. There's some bacon, there's some egg, and then of course there's the pasta. And let's use like the real legit pasta, not the, hey, I went to the grocery store and got some pasta, but the handmade Italian restaurant pasta. Let's get wild with it. Let's say on top of that, you decided to get yourself a side salad. You got some, let's see what else we got here. What else would we eat with that? You got yourself the side salad, and let's say you got some tiramisu. That sounds like plenty for right now. So we're going to start with just that pasta, right? Where are the carb sources? Ask yourself, where are the carb sources? Is there carbs in chicken? Is butter a carb? You see what I did there? No, you're not going to have any carbs in the chicken. In the sauce, it's a creamier based sauce. Could there potentially be some carbs? Maybe. Probably not super likely. Maybe a minimal amount. Then, okay, the veggies. There's going to be some carbs in that, but it depends on the type of the veggie. How much of the veggie? Let's say there's some peas and some mushrooms, maybe something else. The peas will have a little bit. The mushrooms will probably be negligible. I'm doing all of this without any sort of actual photo of this type of food in front of me. I'm just envisioning one of my favorite places. Bacon, no carbs. And then the pasta. You got to ask yourself, how much pasta is here? And what am I going to do to assess it? And most cups of pasta are somewhere between 40 and 50 grams. If you assume your fist is roughly a cup, then how many cups do you have? This place I'm thinking of in particular has about 2.5 to 3 cups per serving, which is why I don't eat the whole thing, because I love it. But as much as I like to eat, I like to not feel overly stuffed either and listen to my hunger cues. Yay. So I got to figure out, how much am I having? Probably 1.5 cups of pasta. Okay, let's just assume that's 45. That's 67.5 plus whatever residual carbs from the veggies and the sauce. So maybe that's 75 grams that I happen to be eating from that. But then let's say there's a side salad. Maybe there's croutons on the side salad. Let's really identify. And that's what I'm talking about. Go into the trenches and really figure out, what is the amount of each of these things. And if you don't know, if you're thinking, I have no idea how many carbs are in some pasta or some peas or some cream sauce, that is why the world invented food databases. Now, back in the day, you get those big old Calorie King books that are the size of an old cell phone. If you're not familiar with that, they're basically the size of a brick, and you carry them around and you thumb through it, and they're all worn and tattered because you've been using it all the time, hopefully. We don't have to do that today. You go on your phone, more than likely, if you have a smartphone, you're in a good spot. You get a MyFitnessPal, you get a Lose It, you get one of these different food databases. You could even go, there's a USDA version from the government. You could Google it. There's a million different places. One of the people I used to work with used to call it the Google Gods. You ask the Google Gods, hey, Google, I think that's an Alexa thing. I don't know. But you get what I mean. You could ask and figure it out. And at that point, now you have a much better idea of what you're doing, instead of just looking at a plate and saying, oh, this looks like 7 units, when you have not the slightest clue how many units are in there. And it's also a hell of a lot better than saying, well, I'm not going to eat it at all because I'm too scared to eat it. Because that doesn't solve anything either. It doesn't solve anything. that just makes you sad and makes you avoid one of potentially your favorite foods out of fear of what your blood sugar is going to do. All it takes is just breaking it down. And I could go on probably 7 or 8 or 10 or 12 different episodes just on the fat and protein aspect. But as long as you're aware that there could be a delayed effect from fat and protein as well, you've done the work. You just have to trust in the process. And you're not going to be an expert out of the gate. I wasn't an expert out of the gate. I used to be the same person of, well, I'm at a restaurant, so hopefully this goes okay. Let's see what happens. And then I realized just taking that extra 2 minutes, even if there's tons of people around and they're talking, even if it's just a date night with Amelia and I, taking those 2 extra minutes made such a world of a difference in my management, in my care, in not spiking, in not feeling like absolute garbage one way or another after the meal. It cut down on the frequency of that probably by 90%, if not more. And ask yourself, wouldn't you love to cut down on, hey, I went to a restaurant and now I feel like garbage by 90+%? Or even cutting down just the anxiety of, we're going to a restaurant in a couple hours and I'm super nervous because I don't know what I can eat that might be safe, that will allow my blood sugar to not go crazy while I watch everybody else eating the foods that I want to eat, but I'm too afraid to eat them because of my blood sugar. And you could cut that immediately and say, what? I'm going to eat this food because I'm confident in my dosing strategy and I'm confident that I'm going to get exactly what I need to do. That is the freedom with food. And that just goes to show that you don't have to be limited in the food that you eat as a person living with diabetes. Really, a person at all who's looking at blood sugar in any capacity. You just have to be smart. And yes, there are nuances. And yes, there are different situations for every single person that have to be considered, because who are we kidding? But as a whole, as a high level 30,000 foot view, go into the restaurant, break down the food, just like you heard me do, piece by piece, and you're going to be set up for a lot more success. And if you're like, I don't know, this is a million different ingredients, I don't know what's in this, that is why there are a million options on these food databases. I think MyFitnessPal has like 5 million entries. If you can't find your food in 5 million entries, then you are eating one hell of a cuisine, my friend. The sky is the limit, and I don't want you to feel limited as a person living with diabetes, because you should not have to. And for so long, I was limited, and it was awful. I can't even imagine. I don't even want to count the number of times I'd go into a restaurant and order things I didn't actually want out of fear, out of concern that my blood sugar would do something I didn't want it to do. And like I'm saying, and like I said earlier, this is not an invitation to go crazy and to say, I'm going to eat anything and everything possible because I can. And if I just sit there and I break it down, I'll be fine. Absolutely. You'll more than likely be okay, especially once you start to get those repetitions in and do it again and again and again. Eventually, you're going to get really good, which I am very excited for you for. But the caveat is, remember, you can be really good at this thing, but at the same time, make sure you're really good at hitting your own personal nutrition targets as well. So whether that's, hey, I'm trying to get stronger. Hey, I want to drop some weight. Hey, I just want to maintain where I'm at right now and cruise and live a healthy, active lifestyle and make sure I'm getting the proper nutrition every day so I feel better. Everyone's into biohacking these days. Nutrition's 80% of that. Nutrition and lifestyle factors. Exercise, nutrition, sleep, all of that, de-stressing, all of that is going to be the majority of that biohacking anyway. But just by being able to do that and saying, hey, I'm doing this the smart way, I'm still able to hit my targets, I'm able to keep my blood sugar in range, that is where the ultimate success will come from. If you just focus on, hey, I'm making sure my number stays in range, cool, but there may be secondary things that come into play, like potential weight gain, like potential, I don't know, other situations where you're like, I didn't hit my targets because I didn't know what my targets were. So now I'm completely out of energy, or now I'm way overly energized and I'm added 5 pounds over the past month and a half because I've gone a little nuts on what I'm eating. So keep that part in mind. It's a 2-part equation. Hit your targets for your optimal health. And then secondarily, in this case, if you're not sure what's in something and you're like, hey, I don't know, break it down. Spend that extra couple minutes. If people at the table get upset with you, so I can already picture this now. Somebody says, hey, Ben, I went to do this the other day and fill in the blank. My wife, my parents, my kid, somebody, I don't know, my friend, my wife's sister's best friend's ex-boyfriend, whatever the situation is. If somebody says that it bothers them that you're doing this, just respond to them really politely and say, hey, I'm doing this breakdown. I'm not on my phone playing around. I'm doing this breakdown so I can inform myself what I need to do to be able to adjust my blood sugars properly to consume this meal and be 100% present here with you. So I feel my best and I'm giving you the 10 out of 10 experience of me. If anybody tries to say anything to that and doesn't understand, they're probably not someone you want to be spending oodles of time with. If they're related to you, they may just need a deeper conversation. But someone who does not have your best interest, where they're saying, hey, I want you to feel your best, because then not only do you feel your best, but then you can give me 100% of your experience. If they don't want that, I don't know why you're hanging out with them, but that's a whole separate conversation that has nothing to do with diabetes. That just has to do with person to person, right? But I'm telling you, break down the food and make sure you can hit your targets with them. You are golden. I don't care what your goal is. Over the past, I'm trying to think this is now. I've been in a deficit phase myself for probably on and off, depends on what we're talking, probably about 6 months or so, 7 months, 8 months. And I personally am down, the maths, 18 pounds. And I've been enjoying food this entire time. It is very possible. Best blood sugars in my existence, knock on all of the wood. And I've been able to enjoy food this whole time because I've been able to do exactly what I just spelled out for you here. So if that's you, that's what your jam is, let me know. Holler at me. We can make sure that you get hooked up so you're able to start that journey for yourself. So you're living life amazing with diabetes, with great food, and feeling your absolute best. But beyond that, let me know what really resonated. What was your biggest takeaway from this? What are you going to potentially do differently after listening to this? Let me know. At me on social. Let me know how the experiment goes when you break your food down. Cannot wait to see what you do, how you do. Hopefully this helps just a little bit. I'm really hungry. I'm going to go get a snack now. All right. I'll catch you soon.